Well, good day and welcome to you to September the 11th, 2022. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you happen to be. My name is Gary Willing, and as always, I want to welcome you to Search for Signs. If you're new, welcome you back if you have been here before, and always encourage anybody who wants to know more about this information to investigate it for yourself. And you can do it, like I said, however you want to do it, you can do it. But I have included links to websites that I think give you wonderful background information about what we talk about. So, check into it or not, see if there's anything to this for yourself or not. And then I also want to give a shout out to those people who have commented since the last time I put a video up. And just real quick, I hate bringing this up, but if you continue to, and there's one person who did this, continue to kind of put the same comments in different videos and so forth, and it kind of becomes trolling, or if I think it starts to be disrespectful toward other people who are asking questions or commenting or whatever like that, well, I will have to put an end to it reluctantly, but I will have to do it. But in the meantime, if you're somebody who wants to comment, comment. If you want to ask a question, ask a question. Post your question in the comment section. Email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. You can do that. That's cool. But I also, like I said, want to give a shout out to those people who took the time to comment. Rick M., you sent me a nice email. Thank you so much. Good to hear from you. You are, as always, 100% correct, and I learned from you too. So I guess you're a teacher as well. So there. Now, let's see. Vanessa Rivera, Thomas Lynch, Spirit Watcher 178, Mark Hill, Cliff Sanajong, Esotericist, J. Breath of God, Live Love, Abusers Yusef. Yes, that's one name. Thank you for your comment. David Boyle, it's good to see you again. Thank you. Mike's Music Den and Smoke Dozia, who was very busy this last go-around. But anyway, everybody, thank you so much for commenting. And like I said, if you have a comment you want to put in there, join the discussion. So I am going to read something that was sent to me via email by Spirit Watcher 178. Do you consider Maitreya and Jesus to be God in the flesh? In a sense, sons of God. Well, no more than you or anybody else, really, that I've come in contact with in my life. Now, are they manifesting that divinity perhaps more than you and I and others that I've met in my life? Absolutely. But they are the guarantee that we will manifest it in the same way. Jesus said in the Bible, greater things than this shall you do yourself. That's what he was referring to. You know what I'm saying? That the divinity is within all of us to do wonderful things, creative things, loving things, and love just like him. Why would Jesus teach humanity what it's like to truly love unconditionally if there was never a possibility of us learning it eventually in the future? It's a very difficult thing to do. It's not easy. It doesn't just happen overnight. You have to really work at it. And like I always like to throw in there, Maitreya said very succinctly one time, I think, was he said he never judges anyone on whether they're good or bad. He only notices the good things that they do. And when I looked at it and I applied it to my life, I started to see that he was giving me a very simple teaching to learn how to love, to start how to love unconditionally. But it takes eons upon eons to love the way the great ones do. But eventually we will. That's why they're coming back at this time, to teach us how to love one another, how to live together in that way. So that's the plan, and then what does that mean after that? Well, we'll have to discover what life will be like on planet Earth when we do start to manifest that. But it starts with the principle of sharing, hands down. But Maitreya also said he comes to teach the art of self-realization. So it does take a couple things. It takes us creating true justice and true freedom, which are two concepts that we have created ideologies about, but in essence, we haven't really manifested on this planet at all. So true freedom is not what the conservative right of, let's say, the United States wants, which is less government regulation on some things, government regulation on others, right? And, the ability to have as many guns and bullets in your house as you want. You know what I'm saying? That's not freedom. That's an ideology, which is nothing but enslaving your own self into that ideology. But true freedom is really living life as you truly are, as the self. But it will only happen when your needs are taken care of through justice. You can't realize the self when you're starving to death. That's the point. That's why we have to end hunger forever. end poverty forever. You don't have to be rich to realize who you are as a divine being. You don't have to have everything come your way, you know what I mean, that way, and have a huge mansion like that and all that kind of stuff. You can live very simply, which is really what we should all be doing anyway, so other people can live, right? But that's, in essence, really what it's about. But I was thinking about how to explain the process of understanding the self, as limited as I know it. I'm not a master. I don't live it perfectly by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm in the same boat as everybody else. But the way I see it is, like, if, you know, we're all familiar with cars. We've all sat in a car. We probably own a car, right? Well, imagine that car is who you are, the man and woman in incarnation that you've identified with as being, right? It has a lifespan, perhaps a few years, 100,000 miles, 200,000 miles, whatever your car is, right? You know what I mean? And it starts off new and it eventually breaks down, right? And then you have to get a new car, right? Which that could be kind of like reincarnation. It might be a different car. It might be a different color car. It might be a better car. It might be a faster car, more fuel efficient, whatever it happens to be. But you as the driver, have you changed? Well, no. And you as the driver would be the symbol for the soul, which incarnates from life to life. So the soul is really who we are as a man and woman in incarnation. That's who we are. The personality that we identify with, that society identifies with, that has all our social security numbers and all our credit cards and either a massive amount of wealth, a little bit of wealth, or no wealth at all, or whatever, whether it's experience, all the experiences in our life, everything that we identify with is not who we really are. It's the personality, the man or woman in incarnation. We are the soul. We are the driver of the car. The personality would just be the car. Now, where the self comes into play is the self is the absolute reality. It's what allows all of the manifested universe and even the unmanifested universe to exist. But consciousness moves within it, and it does not affect the self at all. So the space that allows your car to be parked in the driveway, that allows you to drive down the street, there is a space that allows that to exist. And then where does that space ultimately end and stop? There is no end to it. It keeps going on and on forever. So it doesn't end at the end of your driveway, it doesn't end at the end of your street or your neighborhood or down down a city block and to the left. It never ends. That car can drive pretty much anywhere the streets are, right? And if no matter how fast you go, no matter what kind of car you have, even if the car is totaled, nothing happens to the space which allowed that car to exist. That's the self. And when you identify with the self, that's when you start to look at and identify with who and what you truly are. That's why these masters identify with 100% of the time. When Jesus said, I and the Father are one and the same, he was talking about the self. He wasn't talking about a man living in a cloud somewhere up in the sky. He was talking about that. Even when he said the kingdom of heaven is at hand, meaning it's right there in front of you. There's no kingdom of heaven to go to in order to get there. You don't have to be a certain way in order to get there. It's right there. It's in front of us. You just have to realize it. But you can't identify yourself as being separate from another person in order to realize the self. Because when you start to realize yourself, you realize that there is only you. And that's who Maitreya and Jesus, that's what they identify with 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and they'll never not identify with that. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, the other thing too is when we all see Maitreya in person or on TV, we will see a man who's manifesting his divinity perfectly, like all these other masters, but who will never exalt himself above anyone else. Even the lowest, most uneducated members of humanity will he ever exalt himself above. He sees us all as one. It's just it's the level of manifestation of the divinity in which we're able to manifest. And that's why they're coming back, is to teach us the truth about who we are as divine souls. It'll eventually be proven in a laboratory in France that we are souls in incarnation and not just, little sparks in the brain going back and forth between these different cells and so forth. That's not who we are. That's just the mechanism. That's just the driving force of the car, so to speak. But when you're driving your car, you're not your car. You know what I'm saying? People might identify with that car because they'd say, hey, I drive a Corvette, or I drive a Porsche, or I drive a Mercedes. They might identify with the status of that, but I don't think anybody truly identifies with their car. But we identify with the man or woman in incarnation, which really isn't who we are. We're so much more than that. We're the self. We're what allows all this to be. And to quote Sai Baba, who is a great master, lived not too long ago. He passed away, and then he'll come back again in another incarnation, but very, very advanced. But even that, just the wisdom of what he was saying in this regard is true. So even if he wasn't as advanced as I believe him to be, still quite wonderful words. But somebody asked him one time, how do I help others? And he goes, there are no others. So how do you expect to help somebody that's separate from you? You know what I'm saying? Anyway, hopefully that helps. Now, I want to skip over Mark Hill. I'm reading these in order here. So, Mark, I'm going to come back to yours in just a second. Mike's Music Den, you brought up an interesting point. He said, if Maitreya is an actual being here among us, it's doubtful to me that he would make himself publicly known. That would simply cause many people to worship the messenger rather than focus on working on inner growth and development, which is what which is what is really needed. And I see where you're coming from with this. Rather, I think that Maitreya would reveal himself to a select few who would be in positions to affect institutional and policy changes. And I don't think that these policy changes would necessarily be left-leaning, as there is no conspicuous lack of personal accountability for many on the left. Probably on the right, too. As for the Space Brothers, I do believe that people such as George Adamski, Woody Derenberger, and Bill Maher have been in touch with ascended beings here for humanity's benefit. However, similar to Maitreya, if they made themselves known to too many people would focus on the messenger and give up all sense of personal responsibility for their actions and decisions. Now, one thing, and I see where you're coming from with this. If you're listening to this, I really do appreciate this comment. Now, a couple things I want to say is, and I'm paraphrasing what Benjamin Creme's master said. He said, when you see Maitreya out in public, or when he's known, when he makes himself known, I guess is the way he put it, that a lot of the things that he said will seem very familiar to you because you're like, I've heard this before, right? But because who he is, being the Lord of love, and the way that he will speak to all humanity in this way, the love and the wisdom emanating from his heart will penetrate the heart of the listener and will awaken that truth within them. And that will cause that person to respond and to act in a way that they've never responded to perhaps what they would consider to be rhetorical or even utopian statements before. So you're discounting really who and what Maitreya is, and I guess you'll just have to wait and see for yourself about this. But I do think, and this is where I think you touched on something, is people always want to know from me, or they wanted to know about it from Ben. They probably are very angry. I know some people get very angry with me when I don't tell them where to see Maitreya on TV. Not that I would know anyway, but because I've always told people I haven't recognized them on TV yet that I know of. I haven't recognized them. I've maybe seen them on TV, but also I'm not looking for them on TV. So I'm not rushing trying to find them. So I'll see him when I see him, but that's the exact reason why he's not using his real name. And that's the reason why he's not presenting himself as any kind of spiritual avatar, the Lord of Love, as he truly is. He's just being presented, and he's using a very common Middle Eastern name. So people can hear what he has to say in simple honesty and then truly look within themselves if this is something that they want for the world, right? But when he talks about the need for peace, the need to end hunger, we've all heard these things before. To end hunger and to save our planet. We've all heard this before from people in our own lives. But when we hear it from him, and Ben's master even commented about this when he first started making the rounds on television stations all around the world, is people were listening to him. Some people outright rejected it, but there were a lot of people who sat quietly and really listened to him. They might not do anything about it yet. They might have to hear it more and more and more to really awaken with the heart. Just depends on the person. But they didn't look to him as that, as a Messiah figure and worship him in that way. And I know for myself, I don't worship him in that way at all either. So just as the last questioner was asking about, I see them as sons of God or whatever, or are they sons of God? I don't worship him. I don't believe that Jesus is the only true son of God. I think that's a myth, but they are divine. They do manifest their divinity perfectly, They are uncorruptible. They are wise beyond measure, but they also have a humor that is unbelievable. And but their humor isn't even a law. It in teaching and the way that it opens the hearts of people. They have so much joy. We don't realize what true manifested joy is until we see Maitreya and recognize him as Maitreya. And then it will awaken the joy within the hearts of all of us, and we'll be as little children, as they say in the Bible. But anyway, thank you very much for your comment. Now, as for some of these comments, I don't want to get into it either way, but anyway, I'll just read this one from this person who I think is smoking a little too much doja. Smoke doza. He says he's easy to recognize on TV. His eyes are always the same, dead and evil, and as always stutters. Right now, he's a younger Jewish man all over YouTube. And I remember reading your comment that you commented a while ago. Are you talking about Ben Shapiro? Because if you are, that is absolutely hysterical. Because I think that if you ever post anything on, if you do think this is Ben Shapiro, the very conservative, right-wing political commentator who's Jewish, he's a young guy, right? And he speaks very fast. But if you ever comment on his channel and he responds, I want to know what he has to say, because I think it would be something akin to, and this is my best Ben Shapiro in imitation, but he would say, anybody thinks I'm Maitreya, who has a full frontal lobe, would know that I'm not Maitreya. And anybody that says otherwise is a complete hack and liar. So anyway, I don't know. That's just the way Ben Shapiro, I hear his voice in my head. But if you think Maitreya is Ben Shapiro, that is hysterical. All right. But in terms of the picture that you talked about of him in Nairobi, and that's just background distortion. Like I said, the reason why I didn't comment on it is because I think it's just pretty dumb, to be honest with you. But hey, you probably are smoking a little too much doja, and it's probably making you a little paranoid. But anyway, that would be my response to that whole thing. So anyway, but like I said, I mean, you see what you want to see in life. I mean, this is a classic example of it. If you're always looking for Satan, you're going to see it everywhere. I don't think Satan even exists, to be honest with you, so I don't see it anywhere. I see people's evil deeds. I see people who probably are manifesting evil in a way, right? Whether they're political leaders or whatever, or military leaders or whatever happens to be all throughout history, right? And even to today. But, when somebody talked about absolving themselves of all responsibility, when somebody sees and thinks Satan is guiding their hand, and that's what the devil made me do it, as they say, you absolve yourself of all responsibility. It's your selfish nature that causes this. Just as Paul said in the Bible, even Satan can disguise himself as an angel of light. Even your best intentions can be selfish. And when they're selfish, they can be destructive. And when they're destructive and harmful, they come back on you. So that's what I think he was talking about in that regard. But in terms of this picture of him in Nairobi, Kenya, it just looks like background distortion of a photograph. But, as I said, if you see that, you see it. I can't change your mind. But I'd say lay off the doja. It's making you a little paranoid. So don't smoke as much doja. Now, I want to swing back by to Mark Hill. He said, I'd like to hear about some of your other Maitreya experiences, if you'd ever be up to sharing what you know. I can. I have a playlist for those who are interested. I have a playlist of the majority of the Maitreya experiences that are really worth sharing. I mean, there were some other ones where he might have just waved at me. It wouldn't make much sense. But my first time seeing Maitreya was when I was in the 3rd grade, and I was sitting with my classmates eating lunch. And I'm from South Carolina, and the elementary school was Nursery Road. You can look it up on Google Maps, and you can see it if you want to see it. But I even put a picture of it in the video when I talked about it. But I was sitting there with my classmates, had no idea who Maitreya was not looking for any kind of wonderful spiritual experience that would change my life or anything like this. Just sitting with my classmates, probably talking about a bunch of nonsense. Maybe even talking about, what the next Star Wars movie was going to be like or something. I don't know. Anyway, so the special needs kids were coming out of the cafeteria, headed back to class, and most of the special needs kids, and there was just tiny handful of these kids. I knew all of them. I'd grown up somewhat with them because they were still there in the same grade, even though they were quite older than me. And they were walking out, and Maitreya was behind them as he appeared as a blonde kid about the same age as me. Same eyes, just as Smoke Doja talked about the eyes being dead and evil. When I see Maitreya's eyes, there's so much joy in those eyes. But anyway, as he was coming at me, I could see him out of the corner of my eye gunning for me. And he grabs me by the shoulder and starts swinging me back and forth with this huge hug. And he said, my brother, it's so good to see you again, my brother. I love you so much, my brother. I mean, I pushed him away. And I remember what I said to him, which doesn't make a lot of sense why I would say this to somebody. I said, get away from me, you octopus. Because he was just so clingy. I mean, he would not let go. And he embarrassed me in front of my friends. All my friends saw him. All my friends laughed at him, at me, actually, and made fun of me because of him being a part of the special needs class. Because I had a lot of bullies in my school. Anyway, so, they did not let that go for a while. But anyway, and then I just remember looking at Maitreya as he was walking out, and he was skipping as he was walking out. Didn't faze him whatsoever, and just flashed this huge smile and looked me in the eyes. And I just remember the thought that comes back to me that I had when I saw him was, you'll get it one day, don't worry. It's when I thought from him. But anyway, I remember trying to find him after that, and I couldn't find him because I was going to try to be his friend. I felt bad that I pushed him away and I called him a name. And I felt really bad about it. And never saw him again, but then that was the reason why I didn't see him, is because he was Maitreya. And then there was another instance that was quite extraordinary too. Still, again, I didn't know anything about this information. This was before I got involved in this, so I was not looking for any miracle in any way. And that's important because your mind can put things in there, or it could be proven that, hey, you were looking for that. It's kind of psychosomatic, or it's a placebo effect kind of, thing. But if you're not looking for it, how can you say that it's any kind of, I was deceiving myself, you know what I mean? Or making it all up, because like I said, I wasn't thinking about it. But anyway, I traveled to Japan from Atlanta with a 70s group called the 3 Degrees. They're out of Philadelphia. Anyway, I toured with them one time, went around Japan, and somewhere around the halfway through part of our tour, a elderly lady, well, not elderly, she was older than me, a lot older than me, but anyway, asked them for their autograph and then turned to me and asked for my autograph. And I was like, no, you don't want my autograph. She says, no, I want your autograph. And this was just an ordinary lady. I don't think this woman was Maitreya or anything, but it was just, she asked me for my autograph, and I was trying to think of what I would say in Japanese. Didn't know any Japanese. She didn't speak any English, I could tell. So I wrote a peace sign, a heart, and a happy face, and I signed my name. And then another person asked me for my autograph, and, okay, that's kind of cool, peace, heart, and happy face. How'd that be my trademark, right? And I even, when I was riding on the bus for the Blue Note, which was a jazz club that we played in, when we were going back to the airport, there was a bus that we all got on, like a little van, kind of bussy kind of van. Anyway, there was all these signatures from, there was Miles Davis was in there. There was Herbie Hancock's signature all over this bus, and they handed us a pen to write our name on there, and I wrote a peace sign, a heart, and a happy face, I think right next to Herbie Hancock, so everyone would see it. Anyway, when I got back to Atlanta, didn't know much about Atlanta at all. I got lost trying to meet the guitar player of the band for the next tour. I was about 5 miles away from where he was in actuality. So I was quite lost. This was way before GPS and iPhones and so forth. And turned into this little gas station that had a payphone. This was back when you had to use payphones. You didn't have cell phones. And, well, there were cell phones, but they were, car phones really. And I didn't have a car phone, couldn't afford one. So I had to use a payphone. I was about to drop the quarter in the phone, and I looked on the pedestal, and there's all this graffiti written all over the payphone. But to the left of the payphone, in graffiti in black magic marker, it was real. It was not a vision or anything like this. It said, "To Gary," a heart sign, a peace sign, and a happy face. It said, "Still alive and well," and there was a cross, and it was signed to Christ. And people always say, "Oh, you must have been blown away." I wasn't blown away at all because I wasn't looking for anything. It would blow me away now if I saw it, right? But at the time, I just looked and I was like, who's Gary? He signs his name just like me, like I did in Japan. And I never thought anything of it until after I started reading this information. And I asked Ben, and Ben said it was Maitreya that put it on there. So the thing I was going to say, too, about this is that Ben had made a comment to the group when we were talking about some of these experiences. He always said that Maitreya has appeared to way more many people that have recognized him. And if you're interested in this information, or your heart's starting to awake into the problems of the world, and you stumble across this information, you might have actually already seen Maitreya in your life and just didn't remember it. Just because I did not remember that experience in the 3rd grade until after I knew about this information. And then I remembered it. So, had you asked me in 1990 if I had any Maitreya experience, I said, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. But as I started to become interested in this information, my heart started to awaken to the world's problems and so forth in this way, but also to the fact that these masters are coming back, to Maitreya coming back. And then I started to remember these experiences that I had. And a lot of times they're experiences that you just cannot, sometimes you can't forget about them. I happen to forget about, I think I probably remembered the experience in school, but I didn't relate the two, I guess would be a better way of saying it. But the payphone instance, I definitely kept thinking back to it. And I was reminded of it. And I would see a payphone and I would think about that. And that was like, wow, that's weird. Who would put their name like that and sign it as the Christ even, and so forth. And stuff like that. You know what I mean? So, I have other experiences. And the other one that I think is kind of quite extraordinary, because I didn't see Maitreya, somebody else did, was the time that I was cleaning a building on the airport. I think maybe this is probably what you're talking about. But anyway, and he helped me clean the building. And the lady at the building actually was the one that saw him. So it was a quite extraordinary experience. But yeah. Let's see if there's any else that I could share with you to make it be. Anyway, I guess you just have to listen to the videos. But yeah, I will say this. This is one I don't talk about very much. I did record this video. It has to do with a lesson that he taught me about detachment. And I was doing interviews on the radio, and I took it upon myself to call every AM radio station in the country. And at the time, the only way I could do that was I had to buy a CD of the Yellow Pages. And I could look up per state all the radio stations, FM and AM. And I chose AM stations because they had more talk than, perhaps more of the popular radio stations would be for FM. So I was looking more for talk shows. And I would ask them, do you have any talk shows? You talk about spirituality or this, that, and the other. Some would say yes, some would say no, or sports talk radio station or whatever. If they did, then I would fax them my resume. And I'd get a couple interviews here or there, in some part of the country that I had no idea where it was. Anyway, so I had a map of the United States on my computer stand as I started this project. And if I called, let's say, Washington State, I would put a pin in it. And then if I called Idaho, and I put a pin in it. And if I got I don't remember if I had an interview in this state, but anyway, let's say I had an interview in Oregon or something like this, I would put a pin in, and then I'd get this little flag and I put it in there. And as I started to count these states, I was about one or two out of 10, I would get an interview. And I was so excited. I was like, if I keep doing this, I'm going to have like 10 interviews by the time I'm done or whatever like this. And I remember this thought crossed my mind. It said, just let go of the results of it and just call. And just call. Don't worry about how many interviews you got. And I said, yeah, I know. And then I put another pin in, and I'd do more math in my head, and I'd get more excited or disappointed if I didn't get a call, and then the thought would pop back in my head. Don't worry about the results of it. Just do it. Just let everybody know, that kind of thing. Just call these radio stations. Just go through the motions of it even, or whatever, right? And I was like, yeah. But then I'll get kind of caught up in the results of it again. Well, anyway, I had just called a radio station in Valdez, Alaska, and I was doing it for Ben, actually. And I got an interview. Actually, I got an interview for me, and then I got an interview for Ben. I was like, wow, I can put 2 pins in there, right? Because it's, because I get this thing. Anyway, so I looked. I always had the pin box in the same cubby of this computer station in my room. And I always kept it in the same spot because I was deathly paranoid of that thing opening up and pins getting into my carpet, and I'd have to like freaking move at that point because I don't like pins in the carpet and stepping on them later on, kind of thing. So I always kept it very carefully in the same spot. Well, anyway, when I got this interview for Ben in Alaska, I looked down into my cubby and that thing was gone. I said, where is this thing? Did I put it somewhere else? I looked everywhere for it. I even moved my my computer stand out, looked underneath it. I was like, it's not there. What did I do with it? I remember putting it back here because I always set it right on the papers that I had my resume on. I'd set them right on top of there. And like I said, if I had an interview or a call to state, I would pull it out. But other than that, I would just leave it in there. Anyways, so I started thinking later on that day when I was going to work. I was a musician at the time and I was headed to a gig, and I started thinking about this experience that Ben had with his master when his master made his cigarettes disappear as a lesson to him to not smoke cigarettes. He talks about it in one of his books. And I thought to myself, did Maitreya make that disappear as a lesson for me? It's like, no, there's no way. And I was like, had to have been, because I remember putting it there, right? So I just mentally asked Maitreya, I said, if you made it disappear as a lesson for me, can you give it back to me so I can I'll take the pins out, I promise, and I'll put it so I can put it back into the containers, right? So when I got home from my gig that night, it was about 11:30, quarter to 12 at night or whatever it was, I took all the pins out and I put it in a coffee cup. Well, anyway, the next morning when I woke up, I looked right in that cubby where I pulled everything out. I mean, I pulled everything out of that cubby trying to find that thing. It was right on top of all my papers. And then I took all those, put them in there, and I stopped counting it in that way. So it was just a lesson in detachment, but it was the same. But it was funny because it was very similar to the lesson he taught Benjamin Creme about, or Ben's master taught Benjamin Creme about his cigarettes. So anyway, those are just a few that we can share in the time that I have. But anyway, like I said, if you want to know more, I got them pretty much all listed in that playlist, My Maitreya Experiences. So check it out. You guys have a great day. And I love everyone for listening. I love everyone for who you are. I love everyone whether you believe this information or not. And I just am thankful very much that you are here. So you guys have a great day. Take care. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.